Captain Lee Hannah walked into the biggest examination room she had ever seen. The walls were made of smooth white metal that seemed to glow with its own light. Above her, the ceiling stretched so high that she could barely see it. But what made her heart beat faster were the 12 creatures sitting at a curved table in front of her. These were not humans. These were aliens from 12 different worlds, and they were here to test her. The one in the middle had 4 arms and skin that looked like gray stone. His name was General Thomas's, and he came from a planet called Velkara. Next to him sat a being that looked like it was made of blue crystal. Light moved through its body like water. This was Commander Vex from the Nethori system. There were others. 2. A tall, thin creature with purple fur and 6 eyes. Another that looked like a giant insect with wings that made soft humming sounds. One alien seemed to be made of liquid metal that kept changing shape. Each one was different, and each one was watching her. Hannah wore her best uniform. The dark blue fabric was pressed smooth, and her boots were polished until they shone like mirrors. On her chest were the medals she had earned during her 3 years at the Galactic Military Academy. But she knew that none of that mattered now. Today was the final test. Captain Lee Hannah, General Thomas's spoke in a voice that sounded like rocks grinding together. You have come far. Few humans reach this level in our academy. Hannah stood straight and looked directly at him. Thank you, sir. Today you will take the strategic command test, Commander Vex said. When the crystal being spoke, its voice sounded like music played on glass instruments. This test will decide if you can lead armies across the galaxy. The room around them changed. The walls became transparent, and suddenly they were floating in space. Stars twinkled all around them, and 3 moons hung in the distance. Below them was a planet covered in cities and military bases. This is Corvana Prime, General Thomas's explained. 150 years ago, this world was the site of the greatest siege in galactic history. The battle lasted 3 months. 50,000 defenders held the main city against 200,000 attackers. Hannah nodded. She had studied this battle many times. Every military student in the galaxy knew about Corvana Prime. Your task is simple, the insect-like alien buzzed. You must recreate this siege using our holographic systems. You have 6 hours to plan and execute your attack. Most students need all 6 hours. The liquid metal alien flowed into a new shape. As it spoke, the defenders are programmed to act exactly as the real defenders did. They will use the same tactics, make the same decisions, and fight with the same courage. Hannah looked at the planet below. She could see the great city that had been the center of the siege. Tall walls surrounded it, and weapon towers stood like metal trees along those walls. Above the city, space stations hung in orbit, their guns pointed down at anyone who might attack. It looked impossible. How could anyone take such a strong fortress? But Hannah had been thinking about this problem for weeks. She had read every report about the original siege. She had studied the tactics used by both sides, and she had come up with her own ideas. Sir, she said quietly, before we begin, I need to ask you something. General Thomas's leaned forward. His 4 arms crossed in front of his chest. What is it, human? Do you want me to do the 3-hour version or the 9-minute version? The room became completely silent. The only sound was the soft humming of the alien with wings. Even that stopped after a few seconds. Commander Vex's crystal body flickered. With different colors. What did you say? I can recreate the siege in 3 hours, following proper military procedure, Hannah explained. Or I can do it in 9 minutes using different methods. The aliens looked at each other. Some made clicking sounds. Others whistled or hummed, the liquid metal being bubbled and hissed. Hannah could tell they were talking to each other, but she could not understand their languages. General Thomas's turned back to her. Young human, do you understand what you are saying? This siege took 3 months in real life. The greatest military minds in the galaxy have studied it for generations. You claim you can recreate it in 9 minutes? Yes, sir, that is impossible, the purple-furred alien said. Its 6 eyes all focused on Hannah at once. The siege of Corvana Prime required careful planning, patient execution, and precise timing. These things cannot be rushed. Hannah remained standing straight. I understand your concern, sir, but I believe I can do it. The aliens talked among themselves again. Their voices rose and fell like strange music. Some sounded angry. Others seemed curious. The insect-like being's wings buzzed louder when it got excited. Far above them, in the observation deck, other humans were watching. Corporal Kim Tai-ho pressed his face against the glass. Next to him, Lieutenant Park Yuna shook her head in disbelief. She's lost her mind, Yuna whispered. 9 minutes? Nobody can do that. This is Hannah we're talking about, Tai-ho replied. Remember what she did during the training exercises? She always finds a way. This is different, Yuna said. This isn't training. This is the real test. If she fails, she never get another chance. Below them, the aliens had finished their discussion. General Thomas stood up, all 4 of his arms spread wide. Very well, human. We are curious to see what you think you can accomplish. We choose the 9-minute version. Several other aliens made sounds that might have been laughter. The crystal being flashed bright colors and the liquid metal alien formed what looked like a smile. But understand this, Commander Vex added. When you fail, there will be no second chance. The test will be over. Hannah nodded. I understand. Then begin, General Thomas said. Show us what humans think they know about warfare. The planet below them grew larger as their viewpoint moved closer. Soon Hannah could see individual buildings in the great city. She could see soldiers walking on the walls and ships. Moving between the space stations, a control panel appeared in front of her, covered with buttons and screens that glowed with soft light. This was how she would control her army and plan her. Attack. Hannah placed her hands on the controls and closed her eyes for a moment. In her mind, she could see the entire battle playing out. She had run through this plan hundreds of times in her head. The aliens were right about one thing. The siege of Corvana Prime had been won through patience and careful planning. The attackers had surrounded the city, cut off its supplies, and slowly worn down the defenders over 3 long months. But Hannah was not going to do any of those things. She was going to do something that no alien had ever tried before. Something that only a human would think of. She opened her eyes and began to work. Timer starts now, General Thomas announced. 9 minutes. Around the room, alien eyes watched as Captain Lihana began to rewrite the rules of galactic warfare. In the observation deck high above the examination room, 20 human cadets pressed against the glass windows. They could see Captain Lihana standing alone at the control panel, surrounded by 12 alien examiners who watched her every move. Corporal Kim Tai-ho wiped sweat from his forehead even though the room was not hot. I can't believe she actually said 9 minutes. She's always been crazy, Lieutenant Park Yuna muttered. Remember the mountain training exercise? While everyone else spent 2 days planning their route, she just grabbed a rope and started climbing. And she finished first, added Corporal Chun Minho from behind them. She always finishes first. The humans had been watching their fellow students take this test for the past week. Each alien student had approached the siege of Corvana Prime in their own way, but they all followed the same basic pattern. First, they would study the defenses for an hour or more. Then they would position their forces around the city. Finally, they would begin a slow, careful attack that took most of their remaining time. It was logical. It was safe. It was exactly what their teachers had taught them to do, but Hannah had never been good at doing what she was supposed to do. Look at her, Yuna said. She's not even studying the defenses. She's doing something with the troop formations. On the screens around the observation deck, they could see what Hannah was doing. Instead of the usual view of the city and its walls, the displays showed her army of 200,000 soldiers. Most students would group these soldiers into large formations, divisions, and brigades that could punch through enemy defenses with overwhelming force. Hannah was breaking her army into tiny pieces. What is she doing? Tai-ho asked. Those units are too small to attack anything. Lieutenant Shinji Wu, who had been quiet until now, suddenly smiled. I think I know. Remember Professor Chun's class on human military history? The boring one about ancient Earth wars? Minho asked. It wasn't boring, Jiwoo replied. And I don't think Hannah thought it was boring either. She asked more questions in that class than anyone else. Below them, General Thomas's was looking at his own displays with confusion. His forearms moved quickly as he checked and rechecked the readings. What is the human doing? He asked Commander Vex in their shared language. The crystal being's body pulsed with uncertain colors. I do not understand. She is dividing her forces into hundreds of small units. This makes no tactical sense. The other aliens were equally puzzled. The purple-furred examiner with 6 eyes was using all of them to study different screens at once. The insect-like being's wings buzzed with agitation. Even the liquid metal alien, usually calm and flowing, had formed itself into sharp, angular shapes that showed its confusion. This was not how the siege of Corvana Prime had been won. This was not how any siege had ever been won. In the original battle, the attacking army had surrounded the city with massive formations. They had built siege weapons and supply lines. They had created a ring of steel around Corvana Prime and slowly squeezed until the defenders could no longer hold out. What Hannah was doing looked like chaos. 2 minutes elapsed, General Thomas's announced. 7 minutes remaining. Hannah's fingers moved across the control panel like a musician playing a complex song. She was assigning each small unit its own mission, its own target, its own timing. The aliens watching her could see the data flowing across her screens, but none of it made sense to them. She's targeting supply routes, the liquid metal alien observed, but not the main ones. She's going after secondary supply lines that barely matter. And communication relays, added the insect-like examiner, but again, minor ones. The main communication centers are untouched. Commander Vex's crystal form flickered rapidly, a sign of deep thinking among her people. Perhaps she does not understand the simulation? Perhaps she thinks these small targets are more important than they actually are? But General Thomas's was beginning to suspect something else. He had fought against humans before, during the border conflicts with the Terran colonies. Humans did not fight like other species. They did not follow the logical patterns that every military academy in the galaxy taught. They were unpredictable. And unpredictable enemies were dangerous enemies. Continue watching, he told the other examiners. I want to see where this leads. In the observation deck, the human cadets were having their own discussion. I think I see it now, Jiwoo said excitedly. She's not trying to break through the defenses. She's trying to make them break themselves. That doesn't make any sense. Yuna replied. Defenses don't just break by themselves. They do if you know which buttons to push, Minho said slowly. Remember the ancient Chinese general Sun Tzu? He wrote that the best victory is the one where you never have to fight. But this is a siege, Taiho protested. You have to fight in a siege. That's the whole point. Jiwoo shook her head. Not. If you're human, humans always find another way. On the main display, they could see the city of Corvana Prime in perfect detail. The great walls still stood strong and undamaged. The weapon towers were fully operational. The space stations above continued their slow orbits, ready to rain fire on any attacking force, but something was starting to change. It was subtle at first almost invisible. Small units of Hana's army were moving toward the city, but they were not attacking the walls. Instead, they were hitting targets that seemed almost random, a communication relay station far from the city center, a supply depot that held medical equipment, a transport hub that was used only for moving civilian personnel. What is she accomplishing? The purple-furred alien asked. These attacks are too small to matter. But General Thomas's was watching something else. He was watching the defenders' response to these tiny attacks. Each time one of Hana's small units struck a target, the city's defenders had to respond. They had to send soldiers to investigate. They had to reroute communications. They had to find new supply routes. And each response created a tiny weakness somewhere else. 3 minutes elapsed, he announced. 6 minutes remaining. Hana had not spoken since the test began. Her eyes were fixed on her screens, and her hands moved constantly across the controls. To the aliens, it looked like she was playing some kind of complex game rather than commanding an army, but the humans in the observation deck were beginning to understand. "She's conducting an orchestra," Yuna whispered. "Each little unit is like a musician, and she's the conductor." "But what song are they playing?" Taiho asked. Jiwoo smiled wider. "The song that brings down walls." On the planet below, the first cracks were starting to show in the defenders' perfect formation. Nothing big, nothing that would matter in a normal battle, but this was not a normal battle. This was something new. Something that only a human would try, and the aliens were about to learn why humans had become so dangerous so quickly after joining the galactic community. Captain Lihana's fingers danced across the control panel like water flowing over stones. Each touch sent new orders to her scattered army units, and each unit moved with perfect precision toward its assigned target, but to the alien examiners watching her, it still looked like complete chaos. 4 minutes elapsed, General Thomas announced, his voice heavy with doubt. 5 minutes remaining. Commander Vex's crystal body had turned a deep blue color, which among her people meant confusion and concern. "General, I believe we should stop this test. The human is clearly not following any recognized military doctrine." "She is wasting her forces on meaningless targets," agreed the purple-furred alien. All 6 of its eyes were focused on different screens, trying to find some pattern in Hana's seemingly random attacks. No competent commander would divide their army into such small pieces. The insect-like examiner's wings buzzed loudly. "In my people's military history, we have a saying, a scattered army is a defeated army. This human is scattering her forces to the wind." But General Thomas held up one of his 4 hands. "Wait, look more closely at what is happening in the city." On the main display, the great fortress city of Corvana Prime still looked as strong as ever. Its walls stood firm, its weapon towers were fully powered, and its space stations continued their protective orbits overhead. The city's defenders were at their posts, ready to fight off any major attack, but if you looked very carefully, you could see small changes happening everywhere. A communication relay station on the city's east side had gone dark after one of Hana's tiny units destroyed it. This forced the defenders to reroute their communications through a different station. That station was now handling twice as much traffic as it was designed for. A supply depot that stored medical equipment had been raided by another small unit. The defenders had to move medical supplies from other depots to replace what was lost. This created gaps in the medical supply network. A transport hub used for moving civilian personnel had been damaged by a 3rd unit. Now civilian traffic was being rerouted through military transport hubs, clogging up the defenders' logistics network. Each attack was tiny. Each loss was minor. But they were all connected in ways that the alien minds could not see. "She's not trying to break down the walls," the liquid metal alien said slowly, its form rippling with new understanding. "She's trying to make the defenders break down their own walls." In the observation deck above, Corporal Chun Minho was explaining what he thought was happening to the other human cadets. "It's like a house of cards," he said. "You don't have to knock down the whole house. You just have to remove the right cards and the house falls down by itself." Lieutenant Park Yuna frowned. "But how does she know which cards to remove? There must be thousands of systems in that city. How can she know which ones matter?" Because she's human," Lieutenant Shin Ji-woo said simply. "We're good at seeing patterns that others miss." Back in the examination room, Hana was reaching the most critical phase of her plan. Her small units had been hitting seemingly random targets for 4 minutes, but now those random attacks were starting to create larger problems. The communication system that handled traffic between the city's command center and its outer defenses was overloaded. Messages that should have taken seconds to send were now taking minutes. Worse, some messages were getting lost entirely. The medical supply network was failing as doctors and nurses found themselves without the equipment they needed. This forced the city's commanders to divert soldiers from their post to help move medical supplies. The civilian population was becoming restless as their normal Transportation system broke down. City officials had to assign more soldiers to keep order, which meant fewer soldiers defending the walls. The defenders are weakening themselves, General Thomases realized with growing amazement. Each time they respond to one of these small attacks, they create a vulnerability somewhere else. But how can the humans see these connections? Commander Vex asked. The relationships between these systems are incredibly complex. It would take our best strategic computers hours to map them all. The answer was something that the aliens could not fully understand. Human brains had evolved on a world where survival often depended on seeing patterns in chaos. Ancient humans had to track animals through forests, predict weather from cloud formations, and find water in deserts. They had learned to see connections that other creatures missed. Hana was using that ancient skill in a new way. She could see the invisible threads that connected all the systems in the city. And more importantly, she could see how to cut those threads. 5 minutes elapsed, General Thomases announced. His voice was no longer doubtful, now it carried a hint of fear. 4 minutes remaining. The first major system failure hit the city's eastern wall. A weapon tower that had been operating perfectly for 150 years suddenly went offline. The tower's computers could not get the updated targeting information they needed because the communication relay that served that sector had been destroyed 4 minutes earlier. The defenders tried to fix the problem by rerouting the targeting data through a different relay. But that relay was already overloaded from handling traffic from other damaged systems. The extra load caused it to fail as well. Now 2 weapon towers were offline, and the gap in the eastern wall's defenses was growing. Cascading failures? The liquid metal alien whispered. She's causing cascading system failures. In the observation deck, Corporal Kim Taiho was staring at the displays in amazement. It's like watching dominoes fall. Each one knocks down the next one. Except she didn't line up the dominoes, Yuna said. She's making them line up themselves. Down. In the examination room, the alien examiners were beginning to understand that they were witnessing something extraordinary. This was not just a different approach to siege warfare. This was a completely different way of thinking about problems. Most species, when faced with a strong fortress, would try to become stronger than the fortress. They would gather more soldiers, build bigger weapons, and attack with overwhelming force. Humans, it seemed, would look for ways to make the fortress weaker. They would find the hidden weaknesses that even the fortress builders did not know existed. 6 minutes elapsed, General Thomases announced. 3 minutes remaining. The city's defenses were collapsing faster now. Each failed system put more pressure on the remaining systems. Each gap in the walls forced the defenders to spread their soldiers thinner. Each breakdown in communication made it harder for the city's commanders to coordinate their response, and through it all, Hana's small units continued their relentless attacks on targets that seemed unimportant until the moment they were destroyed. The alien examiners watched in growing silence as the supposedly impregnable fortress began to tear itself apart from the inside. They were learning something about humans that they had never understood before, something that would change how they thought about their new allies forever. The fortress city of Corvana Prime was eating itself alive. General Thomases watched the displays with 4 eyes that had seen 1,000 battles across 50 worlds. In all his years of military service, he had never witnessed anything like what was happening now. 7 minutes elapsed, he announced, but his voice had lost its authority. 2 minutes remaining. The city's eastern wall, which had stood strong for over a century, now had 17 weapon towers offline. Not because they had been destroyed by enemy fire, but because their own support systems had failed. Communication networks overloaded. Power grids rerouted beyond capacity, and supply lines tangled into useless knots. Captain Lihana stood at her control panel, her face calm and focused. She was not sweating or showing any signs of stress. Her hands moved across the controls with the steady rhythm of someone following a plan that had been practiced 1,000 times. But what terrified the aliens was that no plan like this had ever existed before. How is this possible? Commander, Vex asked, her crystal body flashing rapid colors of distress. The simulation is based on the actual historical siege. Every system, every weakness, every strength has been perfectly recreated. If what she is doing could work, why didn't the original attackers try it? The answer was simple, though none of the aliens could see it yet. The original attackers had not been human. In the observation deck, the human cadets were pressed against the windows, watching their fellow student rewrite the rules of warfare. Look at Sector 7, Lieutenant Shin Jae-woo pointed at one of the displays. The defenders are pulling soldiers from the north wall to help with the communication problems in the east. And that's creating a gap in the north wall's defenses, added Corporal Chun Minho. But Hana isn't attacking the gap. She's making the gap bigger. It was true. While the defenders rushed to fix the problems in the eastern sectors, Hana's small units were creating new problems in the north. A power station here, a backup generator there, a secondary command post that nobody thought was important. Each new attack forced the defenders to split their attention further. Each new crisis pulled soldiers and resources away from other areas. The fortress was being pulled apart by its own attempts to defend itself. She's not fighting the city, Lieutenant Park Yuna said in wonder. She's making the city fight itself. Down in the examination room, the insect-like alien's wings had stopped buzzing entirely. Among its people, this was a sign of complete shock. The garrison commander is losing control, it observed. Look at the command frequency. Orders are being issued and countermanded within minutes. The defenders don't know what to respond to first. This was exactly what Hana had planned. Every species in the galaxy had developed military doctrine based on logical priorities. When faced with multiple threats, commanders were taught to evaluate each threat and respond to the most serious one first. But what happened when every threat seemed equally serious? What happened when fixing one problem created two new problems? What happened when the logical response to each crisis made the overall situation worse? The aliens were about to find out. On the planet below, the fortress city's main command center was in chaos. The garrison commander, a veteran officer who had trained for this exact scenario, found himself facing a situation that training had prepared him for. His communication officers were reporting system failures across the entire eastern sector. His logistics officers were reporting supply shortages in the medical depots. His security officers were reporting civilian unrest in 3 different districts. His technical officers were reporting power grid instabilities throughout the northern zones. Each problem required immediate attention. Each problem required soldiers and resources. But there were not enough soldiers and resources to fix everything at once. So the commander did what military logic demanded. He prioritized the threats and assigned his forces accordingly. This was exactly what Hana had been counting on. Look at the orbital defenses, the liquid metal alien said, its form rippling with concern. They're moving to support the ground installations. The space stations that orbited above Corvana Prime were the city's ultimate defense. Their massive guns could destroy any attacking fleet long before it reached the planet's surface. But now, those stations were being repositioned to provide fire support for the failing ground defenses. This movement was logical and proper according to every military manual in the galaxy. When ground forces were in trouble, orbital assets should be repositioned to help them, but it also meant that the space stations were no longer in their optimal defensive positions. And that created new vulnerabilities that Hana's forces could exploit. 8 minutes elapsed, General Thomas's announced. His voice was barely above a whisper. 1 minute remaining. The city's defenses were collapsing in a cascade of failures that fed on each other like a fire burning through dry grass. Power systems overloaded as they tried to compensate for damaged stations. Communication networks jammed as they carried emergency traffic they were never designed to handle. Supply lines broke down as resources were diverted to fix problems that should not have existed, and through it all, Hana's small units continued their deadly work. A targeting computer here, a backup power relay there, a minor command post that coordinated between 2 larger installations. Each target was carefully chosen. Each attack was precisely timed. Each destruction created a specific effect that combined with all the other effects to produce something that the fortress builders had never imagined possible. Their perfect defense was becoming its own worst enemy. "The north wall is completely undefended now," Commander Vex reported. "All soldiers have been pulled away to deal with crises in other sectors. The eastern weapon towers are trying to reboot their systems," added the purple-furred alien. "But they can't get the startup codes because the central authentication server is offline. The orbital stations are out of position and vulnerable to attack," said the insect-like examiner. "The civilian population is starting to panic," reported the liquid metal alien. "Security forces are being overwhelmed." General Thomas's looked at all the reports and felt something he had never experienced before in his long military career. He felt the terror of facing an enemy that fought by rules he could not understand. 30 seconds remaining," he announced. Hannah's hands moved across her controls one final time. She was implementing the last phase of her plan, the phase that would turn this cascade of failures into complete victory. The aliens watched in stunned silence as she did something that should have been impossible, something that no military academy in the galaxy taught because no one had ever thought it could be done. She was about to capture an impregnable fortress without firing a single shot at its walls. 20 seconds remained on the timer when Captain Lihana executed the final phase of her plan. Her fingers touched a sequence of controls that sent simultaneous orders to 17 different units scattered around the fortress city. These units had been waiting in position for the past 3 minutes, doing nothing while the rest of her forces created chaos throughout Corvana Prime's defensive systems. Now they moved with perfect coordination toward targets that the alien examiners had not even noticed were important. "What is she attacking now?" Commander Vex asked, her crystal body pulsing with frantic colors as she tried to track all 17 units at once. "Central authentication servers," reported the liquid metal alien. "Backup communication relays. Secondary power routing stations." "Those are not military targets," the purple-furred alien said, confusion evident in its voice. "Those are maintenance systems, support infrastructure." General Thomas's was beginning to understand, and the understanding filled him with a cold dread. That had nothing to do with the temperature in the examination room. "No," he said slowly. "Those are the systems that tell all the other systems how to work together." In the original siege of Corvana Prime, the attackers had spent 3 months slowly breaking down the city's defenses one wall at a time. One weapon tower at a time, one defensive position at a time. It had been a battle of attrition where the stronger force eventually overwhelmed the weaker one. But Hana was not trying to break the city's defenses. She was trying to make the city forget how to defend itself. The central authentication server that she was attacking did not control any weapons. It did not manage any soldiers. It did not coordinate any battles. What it did was verify that each computer system in the city was authorized to talk to every other computer system. When that server went offline, the city's computers would stop trusting each other. 15 seconds remaining," General Thomas's announced, his voice hollow. The attack began and ended in less than 3 seconds. 17 small units struck 17 different targets simultaneously. None of the targets were heavily defended because none of them were considered important enough to need heavy defenses. The authentication servers died first. Immediately, every computer system in the city began demanding verification codes from every other computer system. Traffic that had been flowing smoothly for over a century suddenly ground to a halt as millions of electronic handshakes failed to complete. The backup communication relays went next. These were the systems that took over when the primary communication network failed. With them gone, there was no way for the city's commanders to coordinate any response to what was happening. Finally, the secondary power routing stations shut down. These systems managed the flow of electricity when the primary power grid was under stress. Without them, the overloaded power network that had been struggling to cope with all the emergency rerouting finally collapsed entirely. The results were immediate and catastrophic. Every weapon tower on the city's walls went silent as their targeting computers lost contact with the central command network. The towers had enough local power to fire their guns, but they no longer knew what to shoot at. Because they could not receive targeting data, every communication system in the city died as the authentication failures spread through the network. Like a plague, commanders could not talk to their troops. Troops could not report their status. Emergency services could not coordinate with each other. Every automated defense system shut down as the power grid failures cascaded through the city's infrastructure. Blast doors sealed shut, trapping soldiers in their barracks. Elevators stopped working, stranding personnel between floors. Even the lights went out as backup generators failed to activate without proper authentication codes. In the observation deck, the human cadets watched in stunned silence as the great fortress city of Corvana Prime simply stopped working. 10 seconds remaining, General Thomas whispered, but the siege was already over, on the planet below. Hannah's main forces were advancing toward the city walls. Not the scattered small units that had been causing chaos for the past 8 minutes, but the massive formations that any traditional commander would have used from the beginning. 200,000 soldiers moved in perfect order toward a fortress that could no longer defend itself. The weapon towers that should have destroyed them were silent and dark. The walls that should have protected the city were unmanned as their defenders stumbled through darkened corridors, trying to reach their posts without elevators or communications. The orbital defense stations hung in space like giant metal sculptures, their crews frantically trying to reboot systems that no longer recognized their authorization to exist. 5 seconds remaining, General Thomas said. Hannah's forces reached the city gates. In the original siege, these gates had been the focus of a 3-week battle as attackers used massive siege engines to slowly batter through layers of armor and defensive systems. Now the gates simply opened, not because they had been destroyed or broken, but because the computer systems that controlled them had defaulted to their emergency evacuation settings when they lost contact with the central authentication network. The gates were designed to open automatically during a citywide emergency to allow civilians to escape. The irony was not lost on General Thomas's. The city's own safety systems had been turned against it. Time, he announced as the last second ticked away. The holographic display showed Hannah's forces pouring through the open gates into a city that offered no resistance. The garrison soldiers, cut off from their commanders and trapped in darkened buildings, could not mount any organized defense. The great fortress of Corvana Prime, which had withstood a 3-month siege by the greatest military minds of its era, had fallen in exactly 9 minutes. The examination room was completely silent. Commander Vex's crystal body had turned completely transparent, a sign of shock so profound that she could not maintain her normal coloration. The insect-like alien's wings hung motionless at its sides. The liquid metal alien had formed itself into a perfect sphere, hiding from what it had just witnessed. Even the other aliens, species that General Thomas's had never seen show emotion, were displaying clear signs of distress and confusion. How? The purple-furred alien finally asked. How is this possible? Hannah turned away from her control panel for the first time since the test had begun. Her face was calm, but there was something in her eyes that had not been there 9 minutes ago. A knowledge that she had just changed something fundamental about how the galaxy understood warfare. I used the city's own systems against it, she said simply. Every defensive measure became a vulnerability when it lost contact with the systems it was designed to protect. General Thomas stared at her for a long moment. Then he asked the question that would haunt him for the rest of his life. Could this work on real cities? Real fortresses? Hannah met his eyes without blinking. Yes, sir. It could. The silence in the examination room stretched for what felt like hours but was actually only 30 seconds. 12 alien minds were trying to process what they had just witnessed, and none of them were succeeding. General Thomas's was the first to speak. His forearms remained perfectly still at his sides, a sign of deep thought among his people. Captain Lee Hannah, he said slowly, you have recreated the siege of Corvana Prime in 9 minutes. The historical siege took 3 months. Please explain how this is possible. Hannah stood at attention, her hands clasped behind her back in the proper military posture. But her eyes held a confidence that had not been there when she first entered the room. Sir, the original siege succeeded because the attackers eventually wore down the defenders through superior numbers and persistence. But that approach required them to accept that the fortress was stronger than they were. And you did not accept this? Commander Vex asked. Her crystal body was slowly returning to its normal blue color, though flickers of confusion still ran through it like lightning. No, ma'am. I assume that any fortress complex enough to be truly strong must also be complex enough to be fragile in ways its builders never considered. The liquid metal alien flowed into a new shape, one that resembled a question mark. Explain this fragility. Hannah gestured toward the displays that still showed the conquered city. The fortress was designed to withstand external attacks. Its walls could stop the largest weapons. Its weapons could destroy the largest ships. Its supplies could outlast any siege. Yes, said the insect-like alien, its wings beginning to buzz again. This is what made it impregnable. But to be that strong, it had to be incredibly complex, Hannah continued. Thousands of computer systems working together. Millions of connections between different parts of the defense network. Countless backup systems and fail-safes and redundancies. The purple-furred alien leaned forward, all 6 eyes focusing on her. Complexity is strength. More systems mean more capabilities. Complexity is also vulnerability, Hannah replied. The more complex a system is, the more ways it can fail. And the more interconnected it is, the more one failure can spread to other systems. General Thomas's felt a chill run through his body as he began to understand the full implications of what she was saying. You were not attacking the fortress, he said. You were attacking the complexity that made the fortress possible. Yes, sir. Every defensive system in that city depended on dozens of other systems to function properly. I identified the systems that the most other systems depended on, and I destroyed those first. In the observation deck above, the human cadets were having their own discussion about what they had just seen. It's like she found the load-bearing walls in a building, Corporal Kim Tai-ho said. Remove the right walls, and the whole building collapses. But how did she know which systems were the load-bearing ones? Lieutenant Park Yuna asked. There must have been millions of connections in that network. Lieutenant Shinji Wu smiled. She's been studying the siege for months. Not the battle tactics or the troop movements. The infrastructure, the boring stuff that nobody else pays attention to. While we were learning how to command armies, added Corporal Chun Minho, she was learning how armies think. Back in the examination room, the aliens were asking similar questions. How could you analyze such a complex system so quickly? The liquid metal alien wanted to know. Our best strategic computers would need hours to map all those interdependencies. I didn't map them all, Hannah admitted. I looked for patterns that I recognized from human history. Human history? Commander Vex's crystal body flickered with interest. What does your species' primitive warfare have to do with galactic siege tactics? This was the question Hannah had been hoping someone would ask. Humans have been dealing with complex systems for thousands of years, she explained. Not military systems, but social systems, economic systems, political systems. We learned long ago that the best way to change a complex system is not to attack it directly, but to understand how it maintains itself and then disrupt that maintenance. The aliens looked at each other with expressions that, despite their different faces, all conveyed the same basic confusion. You are saying that human political experience taught you military tactics? The insect-like alien buzzed. I'm saying that humans learned to see systems as living things that can be sick or healthy, Hannah replied. A healthy system maintains itself automatically. A sick system consumes more and more resources just to keep functioning, until eventually it collapses under its own weight. General Thomas's was beginning to see the terrible brilliance of what she had done. You made the fortress sick, he said. Yes, sir. I introduced small problems that the fortress's own systems would try to fix. But each fix required resources and created new vulnerabilities. Eventually, the fortress was using all its energy to fix problems instead of defending itself. The examination room fell silent again as the aliens contemplated this new way of thinking about warfare. In the observation deck, more human cadets were beginning to understand what their classmate had accomplished. "She didn't just win the test," Lieutenant Yuna said quietly. "She changed what the test means." "How so?" Taiho asked. "Think about it. Every student who takes this test after today will know that there's a 9-minute solution. They'll know that it's possible to make a fortress defeat itself. Even if they can't figure out how to do it, they'll know it can be done." Jiwoo nodded slowly. "And that knowledge will change how they think about every fortress they ever face." Below them, General Thomas's was reaching the same conclusion. But for him, the implications were far more troubling. "Captain Hannah," he said, "do you believe that other humans could learn to use this technique?" "I believe that humans are naturally good at seeing systems as living things, yes, sir. We've been doing it for thousands of years without realizing it." "And do you believe that this technique would work against real fortresses? Real cities? Real defensive networks?" Hannah met his gaze steadily. "I believe that any system complex enough to be truly powerful is also complex enough to be turned against itself, sir. Yes." The alien examiners looked at each other with what could only be described as fear. They had invited humans into their military academy to learn galactic warfare. Instead, the humans had taught them that everything they thought they knew about warfare might be wrong. And somewhere in the back of General Thas's mind, a terrible question was forming. If humans could do this to enemy fortresses, what could they do to allied ones? The 12 alien examiners huddled together at the far end of the examination room, speaking in rapid bursts of clicks, whistles, and harmonic tones that Captain Lihana could not understand. Their body language, however, was clear enough. They were afraid. General Thomas's stood apart from the group, his 4 arms crossed in front of his chest as he stared at the displays showing the conquered fortress. His expression was unreadable, but Hana could see the tension in the way he held his shoulders. She remained at attention, waiting for their decision. The test was over, but she knew that something much bigger was just beginning. In the observation deck above, Captain Yu Seung-won had joined the human cadets. As the senior human officer at the academy, he had been called to witness what his student had accomplished. Now he stood at the window, watching the aliens debate, and feeling a mixture of pride and concern that mirrored what General Thomas's was experiencing. "Sir," Lieutenant Shin Ji-woo asked quietly, "is Captain Hannah in trouble?" "I don't know," Seung-won replied honestly. What she did was brilliant, but it was also unsettling from the aliens' perspective. "Because she showed them that their defenses aren't as strong as they thought?" Corporal Kim Tae-ho asked. "Because she showed them that humans think about warfare in ways they never imagined," Seung-won corrected. "And that makes us unpredictable. Unpredictable allies can become unpredictable enemies." Below them, the alien conference was growing more heated. Commander Vex's crystal body flashed rapid colors as she argued with the insect-like examiner. The liquid metal alien kept changing shapes, flowing from one form to another as its agitation grew. Even the normally calm purple-furred alien was showing signs of distress, its 6 eyes darting between different members of the group. Finally, General Thomas's returned to the center of the room. The other aliens followed him, arranging themselves in their original positions around the curved examination table. "Captain Lihana," he said formally, "you have successfully completed the Strategic Command examination. You have demonstrated tactical abilities that exceed our expectations." Hannah felt a moment of relief, but it was short-lived. "However," General Thomas's continued, "the examination board has some concerns about the methods you employed." "Sir?" Hannah asked. Commander Vex leaned forward, her crystal body now a deep purple color that Hannah had never seen before. "Your technique relies on turning a defender's own systems against them. While effective, this approach raises questions about the ethics of warfare." The insect-like alien's wings buzzed as it spoke. In our military traditions, there are certain boundaries that honorable warriors do not cross. We do not poison water supplies, we do not attack medical facilities, we do not turn a population against itself through deception. What you did today came close to crossing those boundaries, the liquid metal alien added, its form rippling with disapproval. Hana felt a flash of anger, but she kept her voice calm and respectful. With respect, sirs, I attacked military targets only. I caused no harm to civilians. I used no deception. I simply used the defenders' own systems more efficiently than they did. But you used those systems in ways they were never intended to be used, the purple-furred alien pointed out. You turned safety systems into weapons. You made protective measures into vulnerabilities. That is the nature of war, Hana replied. Both sides used their resources as effectively as possible. The defenders chose to rely on complex automated systems. I chose to exploit the weaknesses that those systems created. General Thomas raised one of his hands for silence. The board understands your position, Captain. But we must consider the broader implications of what you have demonstrated here today. He gestured toward the displays showing the fallen fortress. If human tactical doctrine includes techniques like this, it changes the nature of galactic warfare. It means that no defensive system can be trusted. It means that complexity becomes liability rather than strength. It means, Commander Vex added, that the military balance that has kept peace in this galaxy for centuries could be overturned overnight. Hana began to understand what they were really worried about. It was not just that she had found a new way to win battles. It was that she had found a way to win battles that made all their existing military preparations obsolete. Sirs, she said carefully, I believe that knowledge of these techniques will actually increase galactic security, not decrease it. How so? The insect-like alien demanded. Because now that you know these vulnerabilities exist, you can design systems that account for them. You can build defenses that are robust instead of just strong. You can create redundancies that truly work instead of just looking impressive. And you can teach other species to use these same techniques against us, General Thomas said quietly. The accusation hung in the air like a poisonous cloud. Hana realized that she was no longer being examined on her tactical abilities. She was being examined on her loyalty. Sir, she said, I am a student at this academy because humanity wants to be part of the galactic community. We want to contribute to galactic security, not undermine it. But contribution and undermining can look very similar, the liquid metal alien observed. What you call improvement, others might call destabilization. In the observation deck, Captain. Yu Xingwan was feeling increasingly uncomfortable with the direction the examination was taking. They're putting her on trial, Lieutenant Park Yuna whispered. No, Xingwan replied. They're putting all of humanity on trial through her. Below them, General Thomas's was asking the question that would determine not just Hana's future, but the future of human participation in galactic military affairs. Captain Hana, he said, if ordered to do so by human command, would you use these techniques against allied worlds? The question was a trap, and everyone in the room knew it. If Hana said yes, she would be admitting that humans could not be trusted as allies. If she said no, she would be admitting that she might disobey orders from her own government, but Hana had learned something from her study of complex systems. Sometimes the only way to win was to refuse to play by the established rules. Sir, she said, I would use these techniques to protect any world that needed protection, regardless of politics. Enemy, ally, or neutral. Because the real enemy is not any particular species or government. The real enemy is the kind of thinking that makes warfare inevitable. She gestured toward the displays showing the conquered fortress. This fortress fell not because I attacked it, but because it was designed with the assumption that defense and attack are fundamentally different things. They're not. They're both ways of using resources to achieve goals. The side that understands their resources better will always win. And humans understand resources better than other species? Commander Vex asked. Humans understand that resources include things other species don't always consider, Hana replied. like the enemy's assumptions about how you will behave, like the unintended consequences of their own defensive measures, like the patterns that emerge when complex systems interact with each other. General Thomas stared at her for a long moment. Then he asked the most important question of all. Captain Hannah, what do you think human participation in galactic military affairs will mean for the future of this galaxy? Hannah's answer would determine everything that happened next. Captain Lee Hannah looked around the examination room at the 12 alien faces watching her. Each species represented millions of years of evolution, thousands of years of civilization, and centuries of military tradition. They were asking her to predict how humanity would change their galaxy. She thought about the question for a long moment, knowing that her answer would be recorded and analyzed by military leaders across dozens of worlds. Sir, she finally said, I think human participation will make this galaxy safer, but not in the way you expect. General Thomas leaned forward. Explain. Right now, galactic military doctrine is based on predictability, Hannah began. Every species follows established patterns. The Valkyrie use overwhelming force. The Nithori rely on technological superiority. The Killik employ perfect coordination. Everyone knows what everyone else will do. Predictability reduces casualties, Commander Vex pointed out. When both sides understand the rules, wars can be fought with minimal destruction. But predictability also makes wars inevitable, Hannah replied. When everyone knows how everyone else fights, conflicts become mathematical exercises. Whoever has more ships, more soldiers, or more advanced weapons will win. So species build more ships, train more soldiers, and develop more advanced weapons. The arms race never ends. The insect-like alien's wings buzzed with agitation. You are suggesting that unpredictability is better than order? I'm suggesting that adaptability is better than rigidity, Hannah corrected. Humans don't fight the same way twice. We learn from every conflict and change our methods. This makes us harder to predict, but it also makes warfare less attractive as a solution to problems. Because no one can be certain they will win. The liquid metal alien said, its form rippling with understanding. Exactly. When you know exactly how your enemy will fight, you can calculate whether you can defeat them. When you don't know how they will fight, war becomes too risky to attempt except in the most desperate circumstances. The purple-furred alien spoke up. But this same unpredictability makes humans dangerous as allies. How can we trust partners whose actions we cannot predict? Hannah had been expecting this question. It was the heart of their fear about humanity. You can trust us, she said, because our unpredictability has consistent principles behind it. Humans adapt our methods, but we don't change our goals. And what are your goals? General Thomas has asked. Survival, growth, the protection of those who cannot protect themselves. The creation of systems that benefit everyone instead of just the strongest. Hannah paused. These are not uniquely human goals, sir. They are the goals of every successful civilization in this galaxy. But your methods for achieving these goals are uniquely human, Commander Vex observed. Yes, ma'am, and that's what will make the galaxy safer. Right now, every military in the galaxy is optimized to fight other galactic militaries. Formations that counter other formations. Weapons that defeat other weapons. Strategies that overcome other strategies. Hannah gestured toward the displays showing the conquered fortress. But what happens when you face an enemy that doesn't use any of those things? An enemy that turns your own strengths against you? An enemy that wins by making you defeat yourself? The aliens looked at each other with growing understanding. You would make every military in the galaxy obsolete, the insect-like alien said. We would make current military thinking obsolete, Hannah corrected. But we would replace it with something better, military thinking that is flexible enough to handle any threat, adaptive enough to learn from any conflict, and creative enough to find solutions that don't require fighting at all. General Thomas stood up, his forearms spread wide in a gesture of deep thought. Captain Hannah, he said, you are asking us to trust humanity with the power to revolutionize galactic warfare. You are asking us to believe that humans will use this power responsibly. No, sir, Hannah replied. I'm asking you to join us in revolutionizing galactic warfare. I'm asking you to help us create military doctrine that makes large-scale conflicts so difficult and unpredictable that everyone will look for other ways to resolve their disputes. In the observation deck above, Captain Yu Xingwan felt a surge of pride in his student. She was not just defending humanity's approach to warfare. She was offering to share it. She's brilliant, Lieutenant Shinji Wu whispered. She's turning this from an interrogation into a recruitment pitch. She's offering them a partnership. Instead of a threat, Corporal Kim Tai-ho agreed. Below them, the alien examiners were engaged in another rapid conference. But this time, their body language was different. Instead of fear and suspicion, Hannah could see curiosity and interest when they returned to their positions. General Thomas's was carrying a small crystal device that Hannah recognized as a formal certification. Recorder, Captain Lee Hannah, he announced. The examination board has reached its decision. The room fell completely silent. You have not only passed the strategic command examination, you have redefined what strategic command means in the modern galactic context. He activated the crystal device and it began to glow with soft blue light. Furthermore, the board recommends that you be assigned to a joint species task force that will be responsible for developing new military doctrine incorporating human tactical innovations. Hannah felt a wave of relief wash over her, but General Thomas's was not finished. However, this recommendation comes with conditions. First, all human tactical innovations must be shared with allied species, not kept secret. Second, humans must accept oversight from this board to ensure that your methods remain within acceptable ethical boundaries. Third, you personally will be responsible for training officers from other species in human tactical thinking. I accept these conditions, sir, Hannah said without hesitation. Finally, General Thomas's continued, you will work directly with me to analyze the defensive systems of every major military installation in the galaxy. If human techniques can defeat these systems, we need to know about it before our enemies do. Commander Vex stood up, her crystal body now glowing with warm golden light. Captain Hannah, you came here today to take a test about recreating an ancient siege. Instead, you have shown us how to prevent future sieges from being necessary. The other aliens rose as well, each displaying signs of respect according to their species' customs. The insect-like being's wings sang a harmonic tone of approval. The liquid metal alien formed itself into a perfect sphere, the highest honor its people could show. The purple-furred alien bowed with all 6 eyes closed. In the observation deck, the human cadets erupted in cheers that could be heard even through the soundproof glass. But Hannah was thinking about something else. She was thinking about the question General Thomas's had asked her at the beginning. Did she want the 3-hour version or the 9-minute version? She had chosen the 9-minute version not because it was faster, but because it was more honest about what humans could do. The 3-hour version would have been impressive but familiar. The 9-minute version showed the aliens something they had never seen before, and now, because of that choice, the galaxy was about to change in ways that no one could predict. As she left the examination room with her new certification and her new responsibilities, Hannah reflected on the irony of the situation. She had come here to learn galactic military doctrine. Instead, she had taught the galaxy that all their military doctrine might need to be rewritten. The exam had asked her to recreate a siege. But what she had really done was lay siege to the assumptions that every species in the galaxy held about warfare, strategy, and the nature of conflict itself. And unlike the fortress in the simulation, those assumptions had not just fallen in 9 minutes, they had fallen forever.